Hi.
Hi. How's it going today?
Super duper.
Good.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Welcome to the next episode of the BRIO in the Box podcast.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here in our house today. So today we thought we would talk about how CrossFit changed fitness, changed the world of fitness.
Yeah.
It's changed a lot.
It has.
In ways that I think are enormous, but underappreciated. And I think especially if you're like under 30, you might not even remember what the world of fitness and exercise was even like before CrossFit was a thing.
Yeah.
So we're going to go take a little journey back in time. Exercise as a thing, as a hobby, as a pursuit that people did is pretty new.
Yeah.
Right? Like 100 years ago, nobody was like exercising on purpose.
Yeah. Everybody had active jobs or whatever. They just lived their lives. There was sports, right? But there was no like, I just work out to be healthy or whatever.
People were just trying to survive and not die of tuberculosis.
Yeah. Times were tough.
Times were tough. And then you have somewhere around 100 years ago, kind of 1920s-ish, a very iconic character named Charles Atlas.
Yeah.
Is the first major one to promote exercising to create a particular physique.
Yeah. He's credited with sort of coming up with the bodybuilder strategy or methodology, I guess.
He was very big on isometric, contract and hold type movements. He was the one featured in a lot of like the original early magazines, like bodybuilding culture, physical culture magazines and stuff.
Back when the whole world was black and white. Color had not yet been invented.
Then you get to like the 1950s, you got like Jack LaLanne, right? TV's now a thing. He was promoting like physical fitness and exercise in that like post World War II era.
Yeah. And his whole
television.
thing was like, anybody can do this. And, do you have a chair? Cool. We're going to work out using your chair, like sit and be fit and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So he brought it like into mainstream culture and like through the TV into people's living rooms.
Yeah.
Jack LaLanne, big promoter of like healthy living, not so much the physique bodybuilding style stuff, but more from like just a healthy living approach. Then you get into the 70s. It's like now the next generation of the bodybuilders. And you get into like the 70s big, like Arnie, and they're like Muscle Beach, like Venice Beach, California kind of thing, like big dudes.
And they were really starting to like push the limits of the sport. And, that's when steroids started to come out and be heavily used and abused. And these guys were definitely pushing beyond health and fitness and more just like the pursuit of size and aesthetics.
And as it went on through the 80s and 90s, it got way more extreme. So then you get into like the Ronnie Coleman, Mr. Olympia era, where these guys are just monsters. They're like 300 pounds and 2% body fat kind of thing.
Stage, yeah.
They're just enormous. So it became more of like where Charles Atlas started with just like generally looking good for the average man. 70 years later, it got to be like ridiculously freakish size.
Yeah.
And there's all the magazines that go along with it. Muscle and Fitness and Bodybuilder Magazine, those kinds of things. Yeah. Somewhere in there too. So bodybuilding went into like a very extreme, very niche direction.
Yeah.
In the 70s, jogging became a pastime, a hobby for people. It was never a thing before. No one trying to just grow enough food and live on a farm was ever like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go run around.
I'm going to go chase the pigs for a while.
At a slow pace for 2 hours. Nobody ever had to do that before. But like, heart disease was becoming a thing. Like health was declining for people and everyone was just scrambling to figure out like why and what was happening and what you needed to do to not die of a heart attack. Turned out you needed to not smoke 4 packs a day. That was the big problem.
Doctor recommended.
Doctor smokes menthols. And then you get into the 80s and like fitness for women becomes a thing. And it's like the Jane Fonda style aerobics, step aerobics. I fully remember watching this show on like Channel 10 cable, whatever, broadcast from, it was outside in a park in Victoria. And I hope somebody as old as me remembers this. Do you remember this? No, not at all. Of course you don't. And it was like the 3 women doing aerobics outside on the grass in front of the ocean from Victoria.
I mean, there was tons of those things. I think every city had its own local aerobics girl who had a TV show of some sort. And yeah.
So that was
the, like hot pants or whatever they were called.
The leggings with your underwear on the outside of your pants for some reason. The leotard thing.
The leg warmers, the headbands. Yes. Yeah.
So that became a whole culture in itself. So you kind of had
the
men doing bodybuilding, weightlifting. The women were relegated to just this, cardio aerobics type of silliness.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there too, the Nautilus machines became a thing like 80s, 90s. So then you had these big machines, isolated single joint movements. So you got like your seated like chest press, you got your seated yes, no machine thing.
Yes, no machine.
Yeah.
Open, closed.
Yes, no.
That was a weird time because it took what was usually pretty easily done with dumbbells or a barbell or whatever. And now you needed a $5,000 machine specifically for your biceps. And then you needed another $5,000 machine specifically for your triceps. And it just sort of turned to this like massive gym warehouse kind of thing, right? Where unless you had $1 million to invest in equipment, you didn't have the right, startup to get a gym going. So it really changed the way people looked at the way gyms operated.
Yeah. So then the format of the fitness business became, you need a huge amount of square feet. You need millions of dollars of specialized pieces of equipment.
Yeah.
Then your business model is sell as many memberships as you can and hope that no one shows up.
Yeah.
Right. You're basically like just having the space, getting recurring payments going and trying not to have anybody actually ever show up.
Yeah.
Ideally.
I remember going to Ursa, the fitness thing, when we were first looking at starting a gym, and they had these super cool machines everywhere. And there was this, remember the panel system where it was like a wall and there's a TV on the like wall system. And it was this like super slick looking like pulley system. And each piece was like $10,000 and you could get a 5-piece full setup. So it was like $50,000 for these 5 different cable pulley machine things with a TV built in. And now it's like you can fully stock a CrossFit gym for $50,000 for, 15 people. Whereas that one sort of machine setup that you can have maybe 4 or 5 people working on it tops. Like it's bananas.
Yeah, it is silly. So around the turn of the century, the state of fitness, of exercise was big, huge bodybuilding bros, cardio, jogging and aerobics, and like sort of, what do we call it? Average gym goer, isolated machines.
Yeah.
You're doing your 10 to 15 reps. And to be honest, it's pretty boring.
Yeah.
Very time inefficient and fairly ineffective. Nobody was really getting very fit doing their seated whatever movements. So Greg Glassman was a former competitive gymnast. He was, when he was a gymnast, was fooling around with different ways of creating his own conditioning programs to, for the high intensity routines that he had to do. He was a ring man.
Yeah.
That they said. And then he becomes a trainer later on. And he, that kind of personality where he's like, he challenges the status quo. And one of the famous stories. So there's a guy named Mark Allen who was a triathlete, Ironman triathlete. Mark Allen is on the cover of Outside magazine around the late 90s, early 2000s as the fittest man on earth. And Greg Glassman had seen Mark Allen in person in a gym fail a 95-pound bench press. And Greg went, how the fuck are we calling this guy that got stuck under a 95-pound barbell the fittest man on earth? Greg is like, something is wrong here. And so he's like, we got to define what fittest means. He's like, what are we meaning when we say that word? And so he goes kind of looking around, like National Strength and Conditioning Association, NSCA, no actual definition of fitness. You looked it up. What was it?
Webster's dictionary defines fitness as the state or quality of being fit.
Great. Real helpful, right? So he kind of, goes looking around some of the exercise physiology textbooks and the strength and conditioning associations and all these like professional scientific things are concerning themselves with creating programs to build fitness with no working definition of what fitness even means. Yeah. So everybody's working from different definitions or no definition of.
Yeah. Bodybuilders think fitness is looking a certain way. Runners think fitness is being able to run a certain distance without getting too tired.
Yeah.
I don't know what aerobics people are thinking fitness
looking
is.
Cute in your unitard. Yeah, exactly. Oh, you're very fit. You look very cute in your outfit. Yeah. Okay. So Greg's, the major thing that he did for the world of fitness was he defined what fitness is.
Right.
And his definition of fitness is work capacity across broad time and modal domains. So work capacity, how much work can you accomplish in short periods of time, long periods of time, and doing different things, running, jumping, throwing, climbing, lifting, dragging, carrying. And Greg's dad was a mathematician. So he takes a very mathematical measurement to it. He's like, I can graph these things. I can graph the time and the work completed, and we can make a bunch of points on this graph, and we're going to come up with a curve and your fitness is the area under the curve, you know, at all these different times and doing all these different things.
Right.
And so now we have a working definition of fitness that is measurable, and it's all based around power, right? So he takes a basic engineering definition of power, weight or force times distance divided by time. So weight times distance is the work. Time is how long it takes, how much work you get done in a defined amount of time, or how long it takes you to do a certain amount of work. And we have now a working definition of what is fitness.
Right.
And so from there, he starts to tinker with, well, what are the things that are uniquely good at creating fitness?
Yeah. And that's where functional movements come in. So functional movements have been seen in the past, right? Like just doing work in a yard is being functional, right? But then there was things like Olympic weightlifting and gymnastics that would use these movements that were, you know, core to extremity and multi-joint compound exercises, and, you know, did a good job of moving large loads long distances quickly. But they just were separate, unique, individual things. So he started just pulling in all these functional movements from different, you know, methodologies, different sports, and bringing them all into one sort of unit.
Because he's basically like, and CrossFit still is it unique in its ability to create fitness? Cool, bring it in.
Yeah.
If it works, we want it. We'll steal it. We'll put it in the program.
Yeah.
Functional movements, also a big buzzword with not a real good definition until Greg said, we're going to put some parameters around what functional means.
Yeah.
Is it the thing that you stand on and it just shakes the fat off of you? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's super functional.
It's super functional. So a few characteristics of functional movements. They move large loads, long distances quickly. They're unique in their ability to generate power. They follow universal motor recruitment patterns. They move in a core to extremity fashion. They start at the core with the big movers and they radiate out to the extremities. Think of everything athletic, throwing a baseball, doing a high jump, sprinting, everything's core to extremity.
Yeah.
They're compound multi-joint movements. So instead of like single joint isolated shoulder raises and stuff, you're using your
behind the
whole body.
back wrist curls. That's the best. Remember those?
Yeah. Oh, it's still happening. It's just we're not in the Globo Gym to see it happening.
Fine.
It's still a thing.
Do what you love, you know?
Yeah. And so then as he went searching for things that are unique in their ability to create fitness, CrossFit incorporated, like another way that CrossFit changed fitness was the incorporation of, I would say, Olympic weightlifting was huge.
Yeah.
And gymnastics.
Yeah. If you look back at the old school, like videos of gym class back in the day, it was mostly gymnastics with a bit of a like military type level of like cardio type stuff, right? They would have P-bars in a gymnasium in a high school, and they would have rings and they would have mats and they would do like calisthenic type movements. And then that all sort of got replaced by the machines because those were supposed to be better because they were the newest technology. And Olympic lifting was a dying sport.
In North America,
yeah. Much bigger in, you know, other countries. But here, it was a dying sport for sure.
There was, prior to CrossFit, I think I read at one point that there was less than 5,000 athletes competing in Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah. And when you compare that to like a small town will have 5,000 football players, you know,
yeah,
like
exactly.
Not even close.
So that was Olympic weightlifting was a very niche thing that most people honestly had not even heard of.
Yeah.
So the incorporation of Olympic lifting revolutionized fitness in that it brought the clean and jerk and the snatch to an average person that, you know, it was no longer reserved for just specialist, like wannabe Olympians. I'm going to take an opportunity here to shit on Julian Michaels.
I knew it. I was thinking the same thing. I knew you were going to say it.
I was like, should I say it? No, I'm going to say it. You were thinking it. I'm going to say it. One of Julian Michaels' many criticisms of CrossFit, clearly I'm not a fan of that lady, was that no one other than elite athletes should be doing Olympic weightlifting. And I'm like, what? Like, what kind of gatekeeper bullshit is that people shouldn't even be allowed to learn the basic techniques of these movements? That it's like, what's a power clean? It's just how you're going to lift anything heavy to your shoulder. No one other than elite athletes should be allowed to even learn it. Give me a break.
Yeah.
It's silly.
Just so you know, everybody, Julian Michaels does not believe in you. She thinks you are incapable of learning Olympic weightlifting because you are not an elite athlete.
Because none of us are Olympians.
Prove her wrong.
Here we go.
Screw you, Jillian.
And so now Olympic weightlifting has certainly had a resurgence, a renaissance in North America, especially thanks to CrossFit introducing it to more people. especially on the women's side of sport. You know, there was, football and stuff, you might learn to do a power clean. There's certain sports where if you have a good strength and conditioning coach, they're going to teach you those movements. But women's athletics in particular, like you had to get to a very high level in a very small number of sports to even have anyone introduce you to a barbell period, let alone the Olympic lift. So I think that was super cool. That really changed fitness. And now you see those movements as just like part of regular fitness magazines and routines and stuff, even outside of CrossFit.
Yeah.
And then gymnastics too. But like you said, gymnastics was a core part of physical fitness training, like a high school, boys gym class in the 40s or 50s would have incorporated all those movements. And then it kind of got lost.
Yeah.
CrossFit, as far as I know, is the only strength and conditioning program that really incorporates a lot of gymnastics.
Any of the like higher level stuff for sure. And it's funny to say high level because according to a gymnast, what we do is very basic, but and there's plenty of programs that do like push-ups and sit-ups and air squats, and those are all considered gymnastics movements. But CrossFit is one of the few that does rings and, handstand push-ups and rope climbs and stuff like that. And then there's that next level, which is like the calisthenics guys who are literally trying to do the like high-level gymnast movements.
Bar stars.
Yeah.
Shout out to those guys. If you look them up on YouTube, they have tons of cool stuff.
Oh, man.
And they're just like bodyweight calisthenics guys that do crazy cool stuff on like playground equipment.
Yeah, it's super cool.
It's like kind of like gymnasty, but more freestyle. Super neat to watch. I think like the incorporation of Olympic weightlifting and gymnastics into an average person's exercise routine was really revolutionary
for sure
in the world of fitness. So then Glassman's goofing around, finds these movements that are good at creating fitness, at increasing work capacity across body, time, and modal domain. And he's playing around with like how to structure programs, how many days per week to train, how to combine the movements, volume, and that kind of stuff. And what he stumbles on that is the independent variable is what? Intensity. Training at intensity becomes the thing.
Yeah.
So in amongst all these movements, you could do CrossFit, but if it has no intensity, it's not going to create work capacity across broad time and modal domains. He discovers that intensity is the independent variable most commonly associated with increasing the rate of return of favorable adaptation.
Yeah.
That's the mouthful, the actual definition there. And then so he starts playing with things that are good at getting people to work at intensity.
Yeah.
One of them is mixing things up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We've talked in the past about like programming stuff. If you do, a chest day and you're just doing like bench press and then pec deck or whatever, and then push-ups, it's like you just reach fatigue and those muscles have used up all of their energy and they have to rest and recover. And as soon as you rest and start to recover, your intensity drops down. So he would mix in different body parts to have a push and a pull so that while you're pushing, your pull is sort of resting. And then while you're pulling, your push is sort of resting, and allows you to move from one movement to another without taking breaks, or ideally without taking breaks, and allows you to keep a higher intensity because you're moving consistently.
Classic example is Fran.
Yeah.
Squat and press coupled with pulling in your pull-ups.
Yeah.
Thrusters and pull-ups together. It's the highest intensity in terms of power output. People doing a fast Fran at like 2-ish minutes are outputting almost a horsepower of power output for those 2 minutes.
That's pretty good for a human.
Yeah. Have you seen a horse? Those things are huge. Mixing things up like complementary movement patterns, that's a hallmark of CrossFit style workouts. Not to say that we don't do interference style workouts.
Yeah.
The very first hero workout ever posted, CrossFit trivia. Do you know what it was?
The very first hero workout?
Hero workout ever posted.
It was JT.
JT, which is all pushing movements, ring dips, handstand push-ups, push-ups, which is hard in its own way because it's all about muscle stamina, but it lacks intensity because you're just spending most of the time shaking your arms out. Yeah.
There are people out there that can do it unbroken quickly, and you'll get some sort of like cardio stimulus from that. But for most of us, we drag it out over, 10 or 15 minutes, and it's a much slower process. You're never really out of breath. You're always just, like you said, shaking out your arms and waiting for the blood to get back in there.
So those are the 10% of CrossFit workouts. So the 90% of them are complementary mixed modality movement patterns.
Yeah.
Something else that was very, I want to say, revolutionary to the idea of exercise at the time was keeping score.
Yeah. I think that, body lifters and power lifters and weightlifters, they would always have their weights and their reps and stuff like that. But they didn't really have any kind of time. You know, maybe they would rest a certain amount of time between their sets, but they weren't timing the training session or whatever, right? I remember seeing one training montage of this one like super heavyweight weightlifter guy, and it basically showed him how often he's just leaning on things.
I love.
And it's like 99% of his training day is him leaning on stuff, because he's just this monster guy. Like, he's super big and strong as hell, but spent a lot of time resting.
Yeah, so not a lot of intensity.
Yeah.
So keeping score, what became a hallmark of CrossFit. And this is where CrossFit brought in some ideas of sport into an average person's exercise routine. So a person that is not otherwise an athlete playing a sport, but took this idea of training and a little bit of competitiveness and keeping score and looking for improvements over time, because we're measuring what fitness is. We would like to see measurable improvements in your work capacity across broad time and modal domains.
For sure.
So keeping score is a big thing.
And I think, we've talked about this before, but a lot of people don't care about the score, and that's great. It's not about the scores. It's not about the numbers. It's about that sense of urgency to like maintain intensity. If you just casually do Fran over the course of 20 minutes, your intensity is going to be 0 and it's not going to do anything. But if you push the pace and like, try to go as fast as you can, then that's where you get the intended response.
Yeah. And then things that we're good at helping people work at intensity, keeping score is one thing. And then training in groups, training with other people. Which
you would think, like, a lot of people when they first start, that's the most intimidating thing, right? Is they're so focused on, everybody's going to be watching me. It's like, no. You clearly have never done CrossFit before, because everybody's going to be too tired to be watching you. There is something about training as a team, that group dynamic, that just pushes people to, keep going, finish the workout, cheer each other on. It's just, that's where a lot of the magic is.
Mm-hmm. You do have in your brain something called mirror neurons, which means as humans, we like to do what the people around us are doing. We're highly social animals.
Monkey see, monkey do.
Monkey see, monkey do, literally. And so if you're in an environment of other people working at intensity, you're just naturally going to want to do what the people around you are doing, which is also work at intensity. If everyone's working super hard, and what that means to each person is different, but everyone's working at their high intensity, and you're just like, la, la, la. You have an internal like conflict sense of like, I'm not doing what the group is doing. So it's not that anyone else is looking at you and being judgmental. It's just that you gain from being around other people working hard.
Yeah. And we've seen in classes, if you have one like real stud athlete in that class, the average time in that class will be faster than if you have, a class that just got out of bed and everybody's sleepy and nobody's really there to try that hard that morning. It's like, it's a significant difference. It really is interesting.
It's an interesting phenomenon that you and I have observed repeatedly of if you coach like 5 or 6 different classes in a day and you throw one fire breather into a class, like you just said, the average time of the whole class goes up.
Yeah.
Like, interesting.
Yeah.
You kind of need one of those in every class. So now like those are things that are taken for granted. If you think of the number of CrossFit copycat type businesses, I would say the majority of them are training in groups. That's like a huge thing. So where before exercise was generally an individual pursuit, you would go for your run by yourself. You would, go to an aerobics class, but it wasn't like a community type thing. You weren't there to interact or talk to anybody else. It was just the instructor with the headset. You followed along and then you left kind of thing. And even like, you might have your gym bros that you went and trained with, but in general, it's kind of an individual pursuit. So one person's
working at a time, you're spotting each other, like whatever. You're not.
So other than playing team sports, which most people are done doing by the time they're done university, there was no other like community group team training kind of stuff happening.
Yeah.
So then Greg's got this thing that's working pretty well. He's training like some triathletes. He's training the women's downhill ski team. He's training some other MMA fighters, that kind of stuff. And people are just like, hey man, like, what are you doing in your gym? It's really working. And so 2001, CrossFit.com starts posting the workout of the day, the WOD, on CrossFit.com. They just put it out there for free.
Yep.
People started following it as these little like grassroots movement sort of pockets of people all over the world following these crazy workouts. CrossFit would post videos of what the movements were. People would post their times in the comment section. I remember doing that in the early days.
Yeah.
2004, I believe, CrossFit starts doing seminars to like teach their methodology, CrossFit Level 1 seminars. And then they start the affiliate model. So then you can come and take a CrossFit seminar, and then you can open a CrossFit affiliate gym. So the affiliate model is yet another way that CrossFit really changed fitness.
Yeah. Yeah. For the long time there, it was, if you wanted to open a gym, you needed $500,000 or more to get set up and buy all the equipment. And you needed 5,000 members to pay for it and all that. And CrossFit came along and it's like, hey, can you scramble a few $1,000s together to buy some barbells and pull-up bars? Because that's all you need, you know?
And then they took, so if you were a trainer, you worked in a Globo gym.
Yeah.
You got paid by the hour. You were under a heavy amount of pressure to just sell more personal training packages. You were training people on all these stupid in like Nautilus single joint movement machines and stuff. And then not getting paid that well. So then you take the trainer out of that fancy gym, put them in something much more bare bones, and they actually become better trainers that are more effective at creating fitness for people.
Yeah.
Because they have less equipment, so they have to do more functional movements and get more creative with the programming. So it actually, like, by taking away all of this fancy expensive stuff, it actually made everything way more effective.
Yeah. And Greg used to say, instead of, you know, if you want to open a gym, you don't need to be in a premium spot, like in a strip mall or whatever. Like, you can be in an industrial area, and if you're good, people will travel to you to go, you know, like people travel to Costco. Costco doesn't have to be on every corner or whatever, right? So if you make yourself worth it, they'll make the trip.
If you build it, they will come. Yeah. And that's what he would say in the early days. He's like, people will drive past 5 other gyms to come to your gym if it's the most fun and the most effective, and, you know, people like the community. They also, in the affiliate model, it's not a franchise. So Greg's a very, like, free market, libertarian capitalism kind of guy. We get a ton of freedom from CrossFit HQ in the way we get to run an affiliate. There's almost no rules whatsoever. And they're very much of the mindset that, like, if it's good, the market will support it. And if it's bad, you'll go out of business.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
There's no territory rules. Somebody could open a CrossFit gym right next door to you. And guess what? If they're doing it better than you, they deserve to stay in business and you don't. That's the idea, is, you know, put up or shut up kind of thing. If what you're doing is good, the market will support it.
Yeah.
And so it really forced people to do a good job, obviously, and add their own, like, flavor to it. So it wasn't just like a Gold's Gym and it's just like a cookie cutter replica. It had very little format whatsoever.
Yeah. And it's great for people like us that want that sort of freedom and take full advantage to do things the way we do things. And
it's you know, pluses and minuses. It sucks if you're in the area of a CrossFit affiliate gym that is not doing a good job.
Yep.
Because we're all sharing the same brand name. So that sucks a little bit. Not the average consumer doesn't realize that all CrossFit gyms are very different.
Yeah, I know. And that's definitely disconcerting when you go to a different CrossFit gym and you're like, shit, this one's not doing what we're doing. And not a fan. And I mean, I'm sure they have plenty of people that like what they're doing, and that's great. But yeah, to share the name can be tough.
Yeah. And then changing the business model approach from selling thousands of cheap memberships and hoping no one shows up to selling maybe 100 to 200 way more expensive memberships and wanting everybody to show up.
Yeah.
Knowing all your members by name, building a community, something that people feel like they're part of. And then I think we've talked about this before. We do zero advertising. Our members are our advertisements. If what we're doing is effective, a couple hundred people walking around in Saskatoon being very fit and happy and healthy, that's our business card. That's our advertisements right there. And so it's only good for us if people show up and get the results, right?
Yeah.
I don't want someone's money if they're not going to show up and get fitter. To get fitter, you have to show up.
Yep.
So it changed the business model. And I would say the price is closer to the personal training end of things, because that's more of the service that you're getting than it is to the, you know, pay me $10 a month and come and use the equipment by yourself.
Yeah. Equipment rental, and that's it.
Yeah. Maybe use the sauna.
If they have a sauna. Those $10 a month ones usually
probably no sauna, the $10 a month one. Yeah.
Fit for 10 or whatever.
Yeah. So CrossFit defined fitness as something separate, as work capacity, something entirely separate from aesthetics, whether it was just the trying to be skinny Jane Fonda thing or trying to be a giant Muscle Beach guy.
Yeah.
Defined fitness as what your body could do, not what it looked like.
Yeah.
And that fitness involved a lot more than just being able to run really slow for a really long time.
and made it just like a thing that normal people should and could do.
Yeah.
You know, it's not it's not just about the CrossFit Games. That is another level that we test the theories and the practice and everything, but anybody can just be fit and be healthy and measure their fitness and see results using what Greg came up with.
Yeah. And brought complex yet very effective modalities of fitness to the average person. Olympic weightlifting, gymnastics, especially.
Yeah.
Promotion of intensity as the independent variable, I think, was really lacking in almost every style of exercise.
Yeah.
There were certain sports where athletes, obviously like sprinters and stuff, had to do that,
sure.
but exercise for the average person completely lacked intensity.
Yeah.
Keeping score, that's a huge part of CrossFit.
Yeah.
With the competition day to day being you versus your former self or you versus your tomorrow self, right? It's just you versus you, but keeping score is super important. Training in groups.
Yeah. Community driven fitness.
Yeah. Big time. Giving people, and I think it as a secondary benefit in the world, the way it is now, where we're like hyper connected, but actually really lonely. Having like a physical community of people that you see in real life, really fulfills a major human need.
For sure.
So whether you get that from a CrossFit gym or, your workplace or a church community or a sports, whatever it is, like you have to be connected to other human beings.
Yeah.
And then the affiliate model, professionalization of the trainer, created a way for a personal trainer to like build a business, build a career, build something, build a community.
Yep.
It, for better or for worse, use the free market approach as opposed to a franchise style approach.
Yep.
And then the membership model, way less people, and we want everyone to show up.
Now they call that boutique fitness, right?
Oh yes, boutique fitness.
Boutique fitness.
And there's tons of CrossFit ripoffs now. Tons of.
There are tons of them.
There's a ton of them. Yeah. So there's something that it's the evolution of new ideas.
Yeah.
And it follows a pattern called false, trivial, obvious. And it's something I keep in mind all the time. Anytime there's a new scientific advancement or a new idea or a new prevailing theory, at first, the established people the first impulse is to be like, well, that's not true. That's false. So in the early days, CrossFit was very controversial because it went completely against the way people were training. It went completely against what the exercise physiologists in the lab were doing or recommending. So people were like, well, CrossFit, well, that's not going to work. That's stupid. It's not going to work. And then a few years later, when it clearly was working, it was clearly making some very high level fit people. They're like, well, okay, so maybe it works, but like nobody's going to want to train like that. Like it's too hard, or worse, it's unsafe. Right. That was the next thing they said. Like, yeah, it works, but super dangerous.
Yeah.
And then as the data came out, it went like, oh, actually it's super effective and it's safer than all this other recreational stuff that people are doing.
Yeah.
Then people went like, well, of course this is the way you should train. That's obvious. And we knew that all along.
Yeah. My favorite was in the early days when, we would be training our CrossFit style, and then people would come to us and be like, well, I used to train at this place and they don't do CrossFit. And then they would talk about the type of stuff they did. And it was CrossFit. They just didn't call it CrossFit. They were just totally ripping it off, being like, no, we don't do CrossFit. We don't believe in what they're doing. But then they would do the exact same stuff. They didn't call the thing Fran. They didn't, do whatever. But it was like, they were totally ripping off the stuff that, CrossFit was doing. Mm-hmm. It's like, and now it's to the point where I think there's just clearly a lot of different versions of what we're doing, and they all have their own little it's CrossFit without the barbells, or it's CrossFit without the whatever. It's like, okay, so it's not CrossFit, but
it's just watered down, less effective CrossFit.
Yeah. But
we just work out together, but we don't keep score. Oh, okay, so it's less effective CrossFit.
Yeah.
Oh, we don't do barbells. Oh, okay, so it's less effective CrossFit.
Yeah.
Watered down, crappy CrossFit.
Everybody's trying to get their piece of the pie.
Mm-hmm. In that trivial stage, when people were really trying to cut down why CrossFit was not only going to be like not a thing, but also was dangerous, the NSCA, National Strength and Conditioning Association, published false data in a scientific journal showing that CrossFit was dangerous when it wasn't.
Yeah.
And that went all the way through the court system. CrossFit sued the Journal of Strength and Conditioning. The journal article was retracted. The NSCA, this is unfortunate the way it played out. It was a huge thing, and CrossFit was about to be very much vindicated when in 2020, when Greg got canceled and Eric Roza took over, one of the first things Eric Roza did was settle that case and signed an NDA.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we were on the verge. The hearing was supposed to have been earlier in 2020. It got delayed due to COVID. And then that summer of 2020, when the shit hit the fan, that was one of the unfortunate collateral damage things that happened, was it never saw the light of day. But it was being settled in CrossFit's favor, to the tune of millions of dollars that CrossFit got out of that settlement, because the data was entirely falsified, because these people were so threatened by the effectiveness of CrossFit, they scrambled to come up with fake data to show that it was dangerous when it wasn't. So
trivial.
That was brutal. Yeah. So this is false, trivial, obvious. This is an article from Bruce Charlton in a journal called Medical Hypotheses in 2008. I'm going to just read it because I think it's great. An old joke about the response to revolutionary new scientific theory states that there are 3 phases on the road to acceptance. 1, the theory is not true. 2, the theory is true, but it's unimportant. 3, the theory is true and it is important, but we knew it all along. The point of this joke is that, according to scientific theorists, new theories are never properly appreciated. The false phase happens because a defining feature of a revolutionary theory is that it contradicts the assumptions of already existing mainstream theory. The second trivial phase follows from a preliminary analysis which suggests that the new idea is not, in fact, contradicted by the major existing evidence, but the new theory seems unimportant because its implications do not seem to lead anywhere interesting when explored in the light of the current theory. A stronger version of the second phase happens when the implications of a theory are regarded as not merely unimportant, but actually dangerous, which is what happened with CrossFit, because a scientific revolution is certainly destructive, especially of established reputations, i.e., all these guys in an exercise physiology lab for years doing completely ineffective, unimportant work, yet its potential benefits are conjectural. However, once a new and revolutionary theory is in place, its importance is obvious, such that it becomes hard to imagine how anybody could have ever believed anything else. Theory for scientists is like water for fish, the invisible medium in which they swim. Observations and experiments, on the other hand, are like toys in the fish tank. New toys are attention-grabbing, but when the tank gets cloudy, its water needs changing. So CrossFit changed the water.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Anything else you would like to add?
I guess it's important to note that for a while there, Greg Glassman took a lot of heat, and think what you will about all the stuff that happened. But I think it's important to, look past that and see what he did contribute. And he did make a positive impact and change the way all of us live our lives. Mm-hmm. And that's something that, should not be forgotten.
I feel like we, in general, as humans, we need to worship ideas and not people.
For sure.
People are flawed. People suck. Yeah. People have their problems. And if we can separate an idea that comes out of a flawed human from the flawed human itself and take the idea and worship, the idea rather than like icons of humans, I think that gets us to a better place. So certainly Greg was not a man without his many faults, but came up with some incredibly revolutionary things that changed the way most of us live our lives now too. So
absolutely.
Both of those things can be true.
Yeah.
Both of those things can exist together.
For sure.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right. See you in the next one.
See you guys.